DC, good morning. How you doing, man?
Oh, doing great, Martin. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Well, before we get into what we had planned to talk about, one of our followers on Facebook has a question for you. First of all, he said, loved your perspective last week on the Jalen Hurts comments. It cleared up a lot of things in his opinion, but his question was, DC, have your feelings changed any since last week about the impact of Jalen's comments?
Well, yeah, I'm glad he asked that, Martin, because I did make some comments. I stick by what my comments were on there, my perspective, but I do have a little more information at this point, and so, yeah, I've changed my opinion just a little bit. I think they did give sort of an impact. You know, I have some sources. Of course, everybody has their sources. But I have some sources that have some inside information, and you know, I was called after I made those comments on your show. I was called by one of my sources later that evening. He said that he'd heard my comments and he just wanted to give me some information that he had, and that those comments that Jalen Hurts made out of frustration did sting a little bit to the coaches, all the coaches, including Coach Saban, and that there was just a little different. The next day coming in, there's a little different atmosphere there with them. But, you know, that got resolved in a meeting that was held. It got resolved in a private meeting and then in a public, not a public meeting, but a meeting with all the other players to finally get that distraction out of the way. Now, you know, Coach Saban came out and said that wasn't going to make a difference in the play, in far as choosing who's going to be the quarterback. But, you know, I think it's kind of made a difference in Jalen Hurts. I think that this frustration is verbalizing it, it's boiling over, it causing such a big distraction, it blowing up bigger than he thought it would, it causing a problem with his coaches. Is really, I think it's going to do a little bit for his confidence going into these scrimmages and these practices, and I think you're going to see that make a difference ultimately may not make a difference in who gets chosen, but it may make a difference on the performance on the field. So, yeah, I think it's going to have a little lasting impact.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, DC, that when you look at the stats coming out of the scrimmage, I know that was one of the things that you talked about on the DC Capstone Report, which you can find at DC Capstone Report on Facebook. You talked a little bit about the scrimmage, and sometimes when you look at the numbers, you just hear touchdowns versus non-touchdowns, but that doesn't necessarily always tell the story. And I think that's part of the reason Nick Saban said it's a continuing evaluation, it's a process, and it's about consistency. From a Tua standpoint, from what you've heard, if you're working with him, where do you take him after this scrimmage? And then we'll come back and say, how do you take this and turn it into something positive for Jalen as well?
Well, I think the Tua, you know, just everything I've heard from different sources. So I've gotten the same story from different sources that were at the scrimmage, and that is that he came out with utmost confidence. The team seemed to rally around his confidence. He began, and it's not so much the touchdown passes. I think
right.
You alluded to earlier on your show. He made those touchdown passes, but he began to make some throws and some passes that we would call dime passes. He put them on a spot that only his receivers should catch, and his receivers were getting to a rhythm moving down the field. And I understand a couple of the scoring plays was a long march down the field that he really was going against our number ones and did a really good job. And not that our number ones were not doing a good job as well. As Coach Saban said, our ones did a great job. They had the plays covered, but he put it in a window that only he could put it in such a small space. And that gave a lot of confidence to the receivers. So the receivers began to step up. And I heard some great things out of Jerry Jeudy really stepping up in this scrimmage and a few other the receivers, even some of the freshmen, when they got in that rhythm, and he was able to give them the rhythm. I think that is a way that Tua can even improve on. He loves to take some chances in those small windows, but I think the more he does it and is successful at it, he gets more confidence in it. And so I think we're going to see him, if he could just learn to make the throw at the right time and pull that trigger at the right time, I think as he goes through the rest of these scrimmages, he will improve. And if he continues to win the team, I think that was the biggest thing that the people were telling me was that it just seemed like the receivers were really in confidence and in a rhythm with him more than they were with Jalen.
Right. Now you have a guy who's 26-2. The process as far as keeping this guy, first of all, Saban is going to do what he said. He's going to let this competition run out. Now, sometimes people don't understand that competition doesn't mean a guy's not in the lead. In other words, when you run a Boston Marathon, the guy in second may be 500 yards behind the guy that's in first. That doesn't mean he's still not competing. And if something goes wrong with the guy in the front, that the guy in second could come back. But either way, if everything that is said is true, then Tua is clearly in the lead in this competition since fall camp started. But how do you keep a Jalen Hurts engaged and still competing while you keep Tua moving forward like we just spoke about?
Well, I would agree with that to a certain extent, Martin, and only differ with you in this way. Tua may be ahead slightly after the scrimmage, but I don't want all our listeners out there to think that the coaches are down on Jalen now.
Right.
Because I heard coming out of the scrimmage that they were more positive about Jalen's performance. And let me explain that, because I think our listeners hear 3 interceptions and no touchdowns and get thinking, well, he had a bad day. No, I don't think he had a bad day. He was placed in some bad situations. Some of these are situational where you've got a short field and the defense has the advantage on those. And I think some of those were interceptions situational. But here's what I think he did positively and he can improve on. And I think the number one thing in this that most everybody has kind of ignored or not talked about is this year they have a quarterbacks coach that is on them 24/7 with them and dedicated to them and is really teaching them. And he is a teaching coach. Dan Enos has done a great job with Tua and with Jalen. What the coaches were encouraged about was Jalen is actually performing on the field the things that he's being taught as far as footwork, hand placement, and not to go to his legs the very first time, to go to his second, third, fourth progression. And so I think the receivers, were surprised by that a little bit, because there were some throws that made to the second, third receiver, which before he would have taken off and run by then. So I think some of the interceptions and some of the incompletion had to do with that as well. But so I believe the positive there is that the coach is saying, hey, Jalen's listening. He is making some improvement. And when our listeners hear he had a bad scrimmage, that's all they talk about. But I think the coaches say, hey, he had a pretty good scrimmage, because what he's doing is making these adjustments we're asking to. Now he's just got to fine-tune that. So I wouldn't say the competition is over at all. I think it's going to go on into the final weeks and maybe into the first game. I agree with you in terms of the competition. I just had some people say to me on yesterday the competition is over, and I'm like, no, the competition is over, but Tua, based on the scrimmage Saturday, would have taken a lead based on the criteria that Nick Saban has laid out for how he's going to pick his quarterback. However, he also said it's going to be a cumulative effect and it's going to go into the season. And I believe that as long as both of these players stay engaged and so on and so forth throughout the year. DC, as we were going to break there, we were talking about Jalen and him improving. Got a comment I'm trying to figure. Larry Miller said this would be the prime reason Talia skips on Bama. Saban could lose 3 quarterbacks out for this. I'm not sure, Larry, if you could clarify what you mean, what could cause Alabama to lose 3 quarterbacks. I'm not sure. And DC, this is kind of a sidebar from what we've been talking about. I'm not sold that Talia's coming to Alabama. I'm looking at it and going, if Talia's as good as Tua, why would he come here to sit and wait? Because he's going to have to compete against his brother. Then he's going to have to compete against Coach Bryant's grandson, which I don't think that scares him. But he know he's going to sit behind his brother, or we're going to be having this same comment with the Jalen and Tua thing. So I'm not sold that Talia's 100% coming to Tuscaloosa. What's your thoughts on that real quick, and we'll get back to our conversation? Well, I have a little different perspective. I think he probably is coming. I understand where you're coming from, Martin, but mine is just from a different family perspective. I think family-wise and the culture, They're a very proud culture, and I think they're a very, very strong family. And I think he wants to play with his brother. That's something they've always had a desire to do. Both of them did. And I think he could actually come and learn the process from his brother that first year because it was so difficult for Tua to learn the process first year. I think he would do good here at Alabama. So I think he's coming, but that's just my opinion.
And that's, like I said, I used to think that same thing, but they're such competitors. And to know that if you come here, you're going to wait.
I think everybody knows that when they come to Alabama, that you're going to wait. You're not going to come in.
I guess that's true.
Most of the time.
All right. Hey, let's get back to our conversation on the scrimmage. We'll move past the quarterback situation. We'll see if Dan Enos can continue to help Jalen improve as well as fine-tune Tua's skills as well. When we look at the scrimmage, there was a lot of other good things coming out of that scrimmage that a lot of people aren't talking about. And the first place I would like to go to is on that defensive line with the Fedarian Mathis, Johnny Dwight stepping up along with it seems like Quentin Williams is solidifying that middle. What's your thoughts on the defensive line and what you saw and heard from that?
Oh, yeah. I think first, Raekwon Davis and Isaiah Buggs have got that solidly knelt down. They're looking for that third person. I think every coach that I heard from, every person I talked to said that Quentin Williams has really stepped up and done a great job. So I'm looking for him to solidify that third spot. Fedarian Mathis, LeBron Ray coming in after that, Johnny Dwight. They're going to provide. I think we're going to have a good, solid defensive line with a good rotation going. I think we've got 6, maybe 7 or 8 that can rotate in there. But those first 3, they're going to really give some fits. I think we're going to have a lot of pressure in the middle with that defensive line that's going to really give our outside backers and our middle linebackers opportunity to make tackles this year. And I know that the philosophy is going to be get to the quarterback with the outside backers. And if they hold up injury-wise, if we don't have many more injuries, coming out of this scrimmage with the injuries to Jamie Mosley, that was certainly a concern. But I'm hearing that that's probably not as serious as they thought at the beginning. So looking forward to him coming back for the first game. But that that defensive line across the board is going to be very good on the first team, second team.
All right. Hey, Larry Miller responded back. Sometimes, DC, when we're on Facebook and phones, I have to maneuver back and forth. Larry Miller responded back to his statement. He said, "This will be a prime reason Talia skips on Bama. Saban could lose 3 quarterbacks out for this." And I assume he's talking about if Jalen starts or just because there's a competition, because that's what I was describing. And then he came back and clarified and said this: "If I'm Talia, there's no way I'd come with how Tua has been treated. You could lose Tua, Mac, and Talia." I will give you my opinion on when I hear people say Tua's been mistreated. That's hard for me to understand how you say Tua's been mistreated. He played more than any backup quarterback has ever played under Nick Saban. He was a true freshman. You just said that Talia would come here with the expectations that he would have to wait a year. I don't know what Tua expected. To me, if I'm looking at Tua coming in with a guy who was a returning starter, only lost in the national championship game the year before, and is a sophomore, I would expect nothing different than what happened until the opportunity came where I had to be put in. And a lot of people say, well, he should have been put in sooner. Well, Nick Saban knows a lot more about what's going on than just what we saw in those scrimmages, in that mop-up duty. So what's your thoughts in terms of how Tua's been treated going into his second year?
Well, let me just say mistreated. I can't possibly see how that would even be in the vocabulary as to what's happened here, unless you want to say that Joe Namath and Kenny Stabler was mistreated by Bear Bryant. I think they were treated much more harshly than Coach Saban has treated Tua in this situation. I think Tua has been molded. He's been molded by Coach Saban. Listen, here, Coach Saban is the epitome of a person who learns and changes with the times to make things work for his advantage, for the team's advantage. So he wants the best for the individual. He's also looking out for the best of the team. if you look at some of the things that are being said behind the scenes right now on the show you watch on ESPN, on when he's talking, but what's he talking about right now? He is talking about toughness. He's talking about what's going to break you. And why do you think that is, Martin? Because last year he has his 5-star quarterback, his 5-star running back talk about, hey, I wanted to quit. I wanted to quit. So this year he says, hey, man, he's thinking to himself, I've got a whole lot of 4- and 5-star freshmen I'm going to have to rely on. So now I got to help them get past this hump, because that's going to affect our team if we don't do that.
Right.
So he starts talking about this year is going to be toughness. I think last year all he was doing was trying to help. He knew where Tua was, knew what was going on in his, and he knows more inside than me or you or any of your listeners out there know what's going on with his players. He was trying to mold him into being the person he is. If you asked Tua today if he felt like he'd been mistreated, I think he would look you in the eye and say, absolutely not. It's molded me into the person I am today.
How much do you think – I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just don't understand the mistreated comment. I don't think that's a fair assessment of what's taking place. Yes, been hard on, but I don't think mistreated. If Talia wants to come play for the best team in the nation and have an opportunity to start at some point and win a Heisman Trophy, then I think he comes to the University of Alabama.
Yeah, the other question I had, how much of Nick Saban's past as a pro coach had him do Tua the way he did? Because how often do you see NFL teams draft a franchise quarterback and immediately throw them in to the starting ranks, and they absolutely lose their confidence because it's a different level, it's a different speed, et cetera, and then they can never get that back. And of course, now we got guys saying that if Tua leaves, you're going to leave Najee. You guys, if you think Najee Harris is going to leave just because of Tua, you don't understand the way football works. He may be a big buddy of his, but it's going to take more than Tua leaving for Najee to leave, because Najee is sitting in a prime spot for that. But what do you think about Saban's NFL background potentially having a huge impact on the way he handled Tua last year?
And not only his NFL background, but his background with other quarterbacks when he was at LSU and Alabama. When he puts them in and throws them into the fire before they're ready, before they're battle tested, and they get burned really bad, that hurts them down the road for their development, and they may never reach the full potential. So I think that he saw that in the NFL. A lot of players have gone by the wayside when they just throwed in without having them ready when they first come off the drafted and come in. Right. They had some terrible games. I mean, we see people that all the time that aren't up to the potential, that just it wrecks them for their future. And so I think he knew the struggles that Tua was having. You know, Tua didn't start having these struggles in the game times. He had these struggles in the first time that summer program, when it slapped you in the face of how hard it was and the process was at the University of Alabama. And his people knew that within the program. We were helping, and Saban was trying to bring him along slow. And I think that was a credit to Saban in recognizing that, how you discipline someone, how you instill. When I say discipline, I mean how you instill the actual discipline to do the process the way it's supposed to be done in order to reach the best result. And that's what he was trying to instill into, and all of his other freshmen that were coming along, including Najee Harris and others. Yeah,
and with the way things turned out, it's kind of hard to argue with Saban's approach. Hey, DC, not enough time in the day to get it all done. I know that there's been a lot of changes with the loss of Gary Shores, but would you take just a few minutes, tell our listeners about the new changes, what they can expect and look for from DC and the Capstone Report?
Sure. And Martin, first of all, I want to thank you on behalf of the family of Gary Shores. The tribute that you did on your show last week on our Facebook page, it has over 4,500 views of Gary. I just want to appreciate you doing that, taking the opportunity to give that opportunity for us to do that, talk about Gary. You know, Gary's passed and left a void in the DC Capstone Report, but Gary's brother, Lance Shores, has stepped up and filled that void, and he is really taking the DC Capstone Report to a different level. Gary would be proud. I told Gary's mom last night after the first podcast went up that Lance did that Gary would definitely be proud of what Lance is doing. But we have opportunity for our listeners out there, Martin, your listeners and our listeners, to get some great Alabama football content from our DC Capstone Report Facebook page. You can go in there and like that. You can follow us there. But we're brought to you each week by freelancepictures.com and rolltidebama.com. Both of those are sites that Lance has developed to give an amazing amount of Alabama football or Alabama content. If you're an Alabama football fan or Alabama sports fan, he has it. Lance, just to give you just a quick background, Martin, he's a great photographer, a great videographer. He is the official photographer for the Hank Williams Jr. He is the official videographer and photographer for the Tommy Wilcox Outdoors. He's developed all these pictures on his sites. And any of your listeners right now can go to one of our sites, the DC Capstone Report on Facebook or freelancepictures.com, and you can download some great Alabama football content. For example, Lance put up some wallpapers for your smartphone that has the full schedule on there. So all your listeners can go download those today.
Where can they find that at again?
They can find it at freelancepictures.com.
And by the way,
freelancepictures.com.
That's free, Free, Lance. So just like it sounds, spelled out. His name is Lance, of course. It took me a while to catch on to that, but no, not just kidding. But freelancepictures.com.
You can see it on our Facebook page. And like our Facebook page, Lance is going to put up some other content for your listeners and for our DC Capstone Report listeners. If you're a fan of the Alabama football team, if you're a fan of the $1 Million Band, if you're a fan of Big Al and the cheerleaders, he has videos that he's produced over the years that'll be going up. It's got thousands and thousands, millions of views. So you have opportunity to use those and see those videos. And he'll have other little nice little gadgets like the wallpapers and things. And we're going to have some other things leading up to the first game. We're going to try to do some live reporting on Facebook, and hopefully we'll be able to work with you at some point and do some live reporting as well.
That sounds like a plan. That's DC in the Capstone Report. You can find him at David Cott, at David COT50 on Twitter, Roll Tide Bama on Facebook, freelancepictures.com, sponsoring the DC Capstone Report. Looking for some great and exciting things moving forward. Thanks, DC. We'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, Martin. Have a great day.